So just a short reading from Nectar of Devotion. This is entitled Devotional Service Surpasses All Liberation. In Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, 8th chapter, verse 20, Queen Kunti is praying to Lord Krishna at the time of his departure. My dear Krishna, you're so great that you are inconceivable even to great stalwart scholars and Paramahamsas, fully liberated souls. So, if such great sages who are transcendental to all the reactions of material existence are unable to know you, then, as far as we're concerned, belonging to the less intelligent woman class, how is it possible for us to know your glories? How can we understand you? In this verse, Minyam Swasyam Yono Para Puman Swasyam Yono Para Puman Adata Viryam Sasuta Mahatatvam Hiranmayam Mahatatvam Hiranmayam Daivat Kshubitam Dharminyam Swasyam Yono Parapuman Adata Viryam Sasuta Mahatatvam Hiranmayam Daivat Kshubitam Dharminyam Swasyam Yono Parapuman Adata Viryam Sasuta Mahatatvam Hiranmayam Daivat Kshubitam Dharminyam Swasyam Yono Parapuman Adata Viryam Sasuta Mahatatvam Hiranmayam. Any chanters? Daivat Shabitam Dharminyam Anyone else? Divat, at a time beyond memory. Kshubita Dharminyam, the material nature which is subjected to agitation. Swasyam, which belongs to the Supreme, as one of his energies. Yono, in the womb from which the living entity takes its birth. Parapuman, the Supreme Brahman, personality of Godhead. Adata, impregnated. Viryam, human. Sa, that material nature. Asuta, produced. Mahatattvam, the total material energy. Hiranmayam, the original source for the emanation of varieties of material things. Translation. At a time beyond memory, after agitating the material nature into three qualities, the Supreme Personality of Godhead placed the semen of innumerable living entities within the womb of that material nature. This material nature gave birth to the total material energy known as the Hiranmaya Mahatattva, the original symbolic representation of the cosmic manifestation. Please repeat. At a time beyond memory, after agitating the material nature into three qualities, the Supreme Personality of Godhead placed the semen of innumerable living entities within the womb of that material nature. Thus, material nature gave birth to the total material energy known as the Hiranmaya Mahatattva, the original symbolic representation of the cosmic manifestation. Prabhupada's purport. This is a quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam 3.26.19. Lord Kapila is explaining to his mother the relationship between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and material nature. He is informing her how the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the original cause of the living entities who are conditioned by material nature. Over and above the 28 elements of the material creation is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. Life comes not from matter, but from life itself, as explained in the Vedas. Nityo Nityananam, Chaitanas Chaitananam, Kata Upanishad 2.2.13. The Supreme Lord is the original source of life. Om Agyanatmarandasya Gyanandina Salakaya Chachur Militamina Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Vakam Karoti Vachalam Bhangam Lagate Grim Yatkripa Tamaham Vande Shri Grim Nilataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. At a time beyond memory, after agitating material nature into three qualities, the Supreme Personality of Godhead placed the semen of innumerable living entities within the womb of that material nature. Thus, material nature gave birth to the total material energy known as the Hiranmaya Mahatattva, the original symbolic representation of the cosmic manifestation. Interesting that the Lord, this verse says, at a time beyond memory. If it was a time beyond memory, how could this be written? Somebody must have remembered it. Who remembered it? Was it Krishna that wrote this part? So is this spoken by... so this is a quotation from Lord Kapila, explains here, right? In the beginning of the purport, it's explained that Lord Kapila is... it's a quote from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto. And because Lord Kapila is an incarnation of the Lord, just like in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that, to Arjuna that we both had many births. I can remember all of them, whereas you cannot. So Krishna has clearly shown the difference. When the living entity upstart decides he wants to merge, then say, okay, can you remember back when the Mahatattva just started off? No, okay, you're not God. Hop it. Jumping. So unfortunately, people do tend to fall for pseudo spiritual masters or pseudo spiritualists. Simply, they just talk some nonsense, and people think, "Well, that sounds cosmic." Like there was one so-called Swami. Don't know if any of you ever, when you were young, seen a cartoon called the Hair Bear Bunch. So it was these. I can't quite remember it, but I think they had big afros or something like that. So a certain personality used to have such a type of haircut. Anyway, he used to kind of come up with some pseudo-spiritual statements like, love is love is love. It doesn't mean anything, so people think, wow, cosmic. Just nonsense. It doesn't mean anything. There's nothing to it. So the reality of things is actually a lot more practical than that. Prabhupada explains that devotional service is something practical. It's not just a sentiment. It's not like we come to the temple and we've looked in our purse, we find the shiniest penny and we go and give it with great devotion, where we're spending tens of thousands on ourselves. Sometimes on Sanktan on the street, some person used to give you, people would give you like a few coins, and I remember one old lady, she got like a 2 pence out and a real shiny one, as if it was like much more valuable. There's a nice shiny one. See that dull one which is a bit bigger, could you give that instead? Of course you accept everything because you think, regardless of whatever motivation or whatever, we just accept everything and utilize it in Krishna's service for their benefit. That's the mood Sanktan devotee has to have. That Lord Caitanya, he wants to benefit everybody, and as the representatives of Lord Caitanya, then we want to accept whatever service we can from people to start them on their journey. This is the mood that devotees try to develop. So therefore, we don't like to waste anything which can be used in Krishna's service. At the same time, one time, Prabhupada had arrived at a temple and he'd seen some old broken down car, and he said, "What's this?" And the temple president said, "Oh, this was a donation." Prabhupada said, "We do not need such donations." So sometimes people just dump things at the temple and if it's not used to us, then we shouldn't accept it. Now, as much as possible, try to find use for things, but if it becomes a burden. So at a time beyond memory, Lord Kapila is remembering this. And even Lord Brahma won't remember it, because that would be at the end of Lord Brahma's life when everything goes back to the Mahatattva. Is that right? Because at the end of the day, then there's a partial annihilation. It's not the full annihilation. And so there's no one who would be able to remember it. And that's described in the second canto, when the living entities, when everything is annihilated, then, as Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, second chapter, that the soul cannot be annihilated. So the souls which still have karma at that time, at annihilation, then they go into the Mahatattva, and they are like seeds within that Mahatattva. And it's amazing that Krishna is aware of the particular karma which each and every individual, innumerable individual entity is still got in stock. So when the time for manifestation of the material cosmos comes again, then everyone goes back to, or eventually then everyone's placed back to where they should be. And this is a great mercy of the Lord, that we can stay in this material world as long as we like. It's not that we have one life and then afterwards, that's you forever. If you get it wrong, you're just going to get punished forever. You know, if one of the children around here did something wrong, and then one of the parents were just slapping it for the rest of its life, you know, somebody would have something to say about that, wouldn't they? You know, the kid's still 21-year-old. 16 years ago you did this. As soon as you get up in the morning, you get slapped. That would mean that you're actually, so we don't do that. The mood of the parent is they don't want to punish the child. They don't want to make restrictions, but they're thinking the welfare of the child. It's got to grow up and look after itself. It's got to know right from wrong, so it keeps itself safe. And so this is Krishna's mood. Why would a limited living entity, such as a human being, have more compassion or understanding than the Supreme Personality of Godhead? That wouldn't make sense. So Krishna his compassion is endless. So when people say, oh, there's so much suffering in this world, where is God? Well, here, if you read Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, scheduled incarnations, you see the Lord keeps coming again and again and again. The devotees are out on the streets giving out the books. No, I don't want a book. I don't believe in God. Because if there was God, then he would come. He's come. You see it there. He's in the book. He's telling you how to stop suffering. If everyone just takes the book instead of you just criticizing them. Because it gives a good excuse to not actually accept God. Not actually a good excuse. There is no good excuse. It's a poor excuse. The underlying motive is to reject. And sometimes that's hard to understand. But because we have quite a narrow field of vision, we don't see the whole show has been run by the law of karma. The living entities are creating their own destiny. We see someone suffering now, and we don't see what they did before. We see someone doing something bad, but they don't appear to suffer. So perhaps it's different sides of the same coin. I haven't found anything else which explains it better than the law of karma. So when the cosmos is then again remanifested, then that law of karma again starts to come into effect, and the living entities are then again put into different bodies. And then again, gradually, the living entities get the chance for the human form of life. It's interesting because even if one commits terribly abominable actions, then in due course of time, they are going to burn them all up. The fact that the soul is eternal, it means that even for some living entities, if they're extremely sinful, they may have to take many, many births. But eventually, that will be burnt up, and then they get a chance again, because everybody's eternal part and parcel of the Lord. And that means as Krishna is pure, then they are also pure. But in contact with this material nature, then we become contaminated. Just as much as if you're down a trench and you're digging in it, then it's not so easy to stay clean. I used to be a mechanic, and one old guy said to me, what's the sign of a good mechanic? So I come up with my stuff like, oh, he knows how to do this, or he's got this qualification. He says, no, he's got clean hands. I thought, well, that'll never be me. I can never keep my hands clean. But so this is the sign also of an advanced personality, that they keep themselves free from the entangling things of the material world. While in the material world, then we're affected. So we're affected because we're in a world which is, everything is set up for forgetting Krishna. In the spiritual world, everything's for remembering Krishna. So we're swimming upstream. It's easier if we just swim downstream. But if we're swimming downstream and then there's a waterfall, and there's calamity at the end of the waterfall. So this swimming upstream, it doesn't save us from death of this body, but like Prabhupada said in one lecture in 26 Second Avenue, one person was he was glorifying the scientists, saying, "Oh, yeah, you're criticizing the scientists, but they've cured polio, they've cured this, they've cured that." And Prabhupada says, "Yes, but have they cured disease?" So you get these, is it super bugs they call it? Which means that, it's my understanding anyway, is that because people are taking so much antibiotics, then bugs mutate to a point where the antibiotics don't have any effect any longer. So therefore we cannot escape the law of karma. One disease may be cured, but the karma will just manifest in another disease. As simple as that. So therefore Prabhupada says, yes, but have they cured disease? And then of course they couldn't answer that. And he says, that I am doing. He says, so this actually came from a conversation where the guest said to Prabhupada after the lecture that I don't feel that I should bow down to anybody, and I don't feel that anyone should bow down to me. And Prabhupada says, very good. You have diagnosed your own disease. You're feeling wrongly. So just because we feel something doesn't mean to say it's right. The various institutions are filled with people who did something because they felt it. Feeling is one of the thinking, feeling, and willing are traits of the mind. But it doesn't mean to say it's reality. It doesn't mean to say that it's true. It's true that we felt it, but it doesn't mean to say it's actually correct. So Prabhupada said that you don't want to bow down, but you're bound down to so many things. You're bound down to birth. Who cannot bow down to birth? If you find yourself in the womb, you can't do a Sukadeva Goswami and say, "No, I'm not coming out. It's too risky out there." The only person we know who did that was Sukadeva Goswami, or was there another sage who didn't come out the womb? Anybody? That's right, yeah. That's correct. Thanks for that one. But we're forced. Time comes, and then that's it. You're out again. And so, yeah, birth, disease, even sometimes newborn babies can have diseases. And throughout our life, we get various diseases, various ailments. Then old age comes, and old age means disease. It means the body's becoming more restricted. You don't have the same energy. You don't have the same abilities. And then finally, death. So Prabhupada said, you bow down to Krishna, no more birth, death, old age, and disease. So this is what Prabhupada is giving. So it's interesting that this word para, Puman, the Supreme Brahman, the personality of Godhead, the Prabhupada didn't just leave it as the Supreme Brahman. He wanted to make it clear that we're not talking about the Brahman effulgence, that Krishna is the Supreme Brahman. So sometimes Brahman is referred to as Krishna's effulgence, but here Prabhupada is talking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It makes it clear so that someone doesn't come along later on and say, oh, Prabhupada's talking about surrendering to the Brahman here. So it's very clear. The context. So Prabhupada's talking about how the Supreme Lord placed the living entities within the material nature. It's not just some kind of mechanical process without a cause behind it. And of course, from the Brahma Samhita, we learn Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Krishna is the cause of all causes. So this is very difficult to understand because we think, okay, well, that's fine, but what caused Krishna? But this is the answer, nothing. He is the cause of all causes. So Prabhupada mentions in the Caitanya Caritamrita, can't remember where, but it's there that because the living entity thinks in terms of yesterday, today, and tomorrow, we lose our sense of eternality. So therefore, we can't understand that every living entity always existed. The Supreme Lord always existed. There was no cause beyond Krishna. That's because we are so heavily conditioned that we have to see some cause for something. You see a product in the shop and you think the cause of that was some people making it in a factory. Where did stuff come from? Oh, the cotton grew in a field, or whatever it was taken from some resource. So, Prabhupada says that when this is in reference to Nitya Bada. He says the Nitya Bada, eternally conditioned, then they can't conceive of not having been conditioned. That since time immemorial, he says it doesn't mean eternal. Nitya doesn't mean eternal. He says it means since time immemorial. And this, he says that when the Nitya Bada is liberated, they realize that they were never Nitya Siddha. When the Nitya Bada is liberated, they become Nitya Siddha. They realize that they were actually never conditioned. So temporarily, the pure living entity is covered by the three modes of material nature. And in due course of time, when we stop associating with these modes, then we become pure spirit soul, which is eternal part and parcel. So there's a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam where Maharaj Yudhishthira asks Krishna that how is it, why did the living entity give up their service and come to this material world? So I can't remember the exact answer there, But in the first canto, Srila Prabhupada says that the living entity wanted to come to this material world to enjoy separately from Krishna. But it's designed in such a way that even though we might be here not just for countless births, but might be here for countless cosmic manifestations and dissolutions, we can hardly remember what we did at this time yesterday or last week. Just like someone asked me to give class, and I said, "Who gave class last week?" "You did. So you should know what the next verse is." But it's hard to remember the slightest thing. We can't even remember where we put our phone. We panic. We can't remember where we left our bead bag. Even got up in the morning, we're all groggy. We can't even remember where we put our toothbrush. I'm sure I put it there. What to speak of remembering before we come into this material world what kind of existence we had. Shishikodanitama Pishashiki. But the Supreme Lord remembers all of the living entities, and Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. The Supreme Lord comes millennium after millennium, yuga after yuga. He comes time and time again to show compassion to the living entities, Patana Sadhunam Vinashaya Chaduskritam, to attract the devotees back to the spiritual world and to punish the miscreants because they're getting a bit too rowdy. Just like last night we were in Glasgow and there was some celebration of some football supporters. And you can tell that you can see in the atmosphere a lot of people are drunk and anything could kick off, and the police are around and they let a certain amount go. They don't just like capture everybody who looks a little bit iffy. But once things kick off, then the police move in and say, "Okay, that's enough, stop it, or you're getting locked up." And then some of them don't stop it and they get locked up. So Krishna tolerates a certain amount in the material world, but then he'll come in and say, "Okay, the world is overburdened by demoniac persons, so that he has to put it right." So he's continually putting it right and giving the pious living entities the opportunity to practice spiritual life and advance towards him. So this is an aspect of the Lord protecting devotees. And because we are very passionate, we think everything must happen now, that Krishna's got his own time. And Krishna protecting us may actually span over lifetimes. Brahmanda Konya Bhagavana Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lata Bij, that we wander through so many species in so many different universes. And when we have some desire to know what is beyond this world, there must be something more than this, then Krishna starts directing us towards spiritual authority. And then finally we get the opportunity to directly hear about Krishna from Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Caitanya Caritamrita, from the devotees. It's interesting, when you read Bhagavad Gita, there's a chapter called Most Confidential Knowledge, isn't there? Remember that one? So you think, well, how could it be confidential if there's like millions of books everywhere? Has anybody got any thoughts on that? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Krishna doesn't reveal to everyone and anyone. So this is a confidential knowledge because it's a revealed knowledge. Only when Krishna is pleased with our service, he reveals himself. And that's why that knowledge is confidential, because it's, even though it's there for everyone, not everyone can understand it and practice.
Yep. Also,
we see in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has given all, the complete tattva, he explained everything. But even though most of the world, they are not willing to listen, we can find many copies of Bhagavad Gita with distorted meaning. Even when clearly Krishna says, Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Raja, they said, Yathama Tatopad. So it's like it is most confidential because we don't want to listen, we don't want to surrender.
Yeah, another good answer. Did you have?
I think it could be seen as confidential because even though it's readily available, it actually takes quite a lot of work to get it. Like you can have a copy of the Gita, they're very readily available, but to pick it up and read it, to get all the way through to the 9th chapter, it takes a lot of dedication and devotion to even get there. So even though it is accessible, it's not free to everyone. So it could be seen as confidential in that sense, perhaps.
Yeah, all very good answers. The first answer also is very good because certain chapters are leading up to this, and we see the seed verses of Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita in the chapter 10. So in that middle chapter, 9, and then you've got other chapters afterwards. So sometimes that's the case. If you've got something which is valuable, then you sandwich it, you hide it in something. And how's it hidden? Because Tesham Satata Yuktanam, like Gandaki Prabhu was saying, that Krishna doesn't reveal to everybody, but to the devotee he reveals. The process is not simply that we just look at the book and think, okay, I know what that is, it's not confidential any longer. But to hear the authorized version of the Gita is like so many people may translate the Gita, even if they think in their mind they're doing their best, because they may not be authorized, they may not have studied under a bona fide spiritual master, then they mistranslate, they misinterpret the Gita, and therefore they don't get that understanding, that knowledge, so they can't decide. Many years ago there was over 600 different translations of Bhagavad Gita, but there's only one Bhagavad Gita as it is. So it's not that someone just comes along and says, oh, Bhagavad Gita, I'll just translate it. And Prabhupada talks about this, where he says that if people want to write some message other than what the Bhagavad Gita is saying, then why don't they just write their own book? Because they want to ride on the coattails of the fame of Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is famous, so let me just do my version of Bhagavad Gita. As a Hoksha, he does this drama at Hoksha called the Bhagavad Gita as it never was, not as it is. Bhagavad Gita as I think it should be. And I was once asked to give a Bhagavad Gita introduction. Had our friends' class, and they were reading a certain Gita, and they sent some questions to us before I went there to give the introduction. And I could understand that by the version of the Gita that they were reading, that it was actually creating confusion. So I was thinking, how can I speak from their Gita? I can only speak from Prabhupada's Gita. So we went to give the talk, and I says that because we come in the tradition of Bhakti Yoga, Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, then we'll be speaking from this Bhagavad Gita. So I'll answer your verses from this Gita. So when we answered them from that Gita, I think, oh, that makes sense. That sounds much more practical. And you could see they were so relieved. And then the person who was organizing that program sponsored Prabhupada's Gita for each of the students. So this is the difference, when people hear Bhagavad Gita explained by Srila Prabhupada, by the pure devotee, then it's much more practical, because people were thinking they have to give up their families and go and live in the forest, and they're thinking, how can I do that? I've got the family to maintain, and then whatever situation they're in. But the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes it much more practical. The renunciation he's talking about is not to simply just give up this false sense of proprietorship by transferring it to another false sense of proprietorship by living in the forest or living in the mountains, which also belong to Krishna, but to accept that nothing belongs to me. Prabhupada explains in the first canto that one of the first principles of spiritual life is nirmama, nothing is mine. And the first principle of material life is aham mameti. Everything is mine. You know, if I can get my hands on it. I am the body, I am this mind, and whatever I can gather, that becomes mine. And my time, I use it to perform activities which enable me to accumulate things around which I call mine, which I leave behind for other living entities which I think are mine, and they'll do the same, and this has been going on since time immemorial. But a devotee's life is different from that. Whatever ashram they may be in, they're always thinking everything is Krishna's, let me use it in Krishna's service. Everybody is Krishna's and everything is Krishna's. And this way a devotee never becomes entangled. So the devotees can understand these verses. But the materialists, because they don't have faith in the Supreme Lord, then this Nityanam, Chaitanas Chaitananam, from the Katha Upanishad, that the Supreme Lord is the original source of all life, basically is of all living entities, he's the chief living entity. And within the material world, people don't want to accept that. That is a difficulty. And then there are people also who do believe in God of some description, and Prabhupada said that we should not disturb their faith. Maybe they have less knowledge or less faith than we have, but perhaps we had less than them not so long ago as well. So we shouldn't think, well, I know so much, and you're just like, got this limited understanding, or your way is wrong. So if some form of religion is bringing people closer to God, then that's to be encouraged. Prabhupada was always like that. So if people go forward in their own religion, then they'll see there is no difference. It is one and the same God. So when they say that God is one, it doesn't just mean that some homogeneous Brahman light. But God is one as in there is one God, one Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom all the other living entities emanate. So therefore he's known as the Chief Eternal. So we spoke a little bit last week about how the Supreme Lord's senses are interchangeable, that simply just by glancing at the material energy, then the living entity, the material energy is agitated and then things take motion. So just by the will of the Lord, things happen. And when we offer food to the Lord, then he accepts it by glancing at it. Except there's one pastime. Gandaki might remember the personalities involved, but there was one great devotee. He had a young son who was also a great devotee, but he had to go on for some reason he had to go visit another town. And he said, make sure that the offering goes on at a certain time. Make sure the deity gets his offering. So he put the offering on and told the deity to eat. And the offering was just there. And then he became anxious. You know, my dad told me, you got to eat the offering. And the boy had so much faith and devotion that the deity actually ate the offering. And when the father came back, he expected to see the Maha. Then he said, where's the Maha Prasad? He said, Krishna didn't leave anything. And he's thinking, what nonsense is this? He says, maybe the boy took it all himself, but he's such a good boy, he's not a thief. So after this happened a couple of times, then the father decided to check out for himself. So he told the boy to make the offering again, and then he hid somewhere out of sight and he watched. And when the deity was eating from Ladu, then he came out from behind his hiding place and the deity posed like that. I understand this is how the Ladu Gopal deity came around. That's one version I heard. Anybody else heard that one? Yeah. So because the boy had so much faith in the deity, it was like, come on, Krishna, you have to eat. He's seeing the deity is non-different. And the deity's not eating. I'm going to get in trouble. You have to eat this offering. The boy was so distressed, then Krishna ate it. But when the father came out, who wasn't expecting the deity to eat that, and thought maybe the boy's playing some game or something, then the deity froze. So generally Krishna does accept offerings by glancing, but on occasion then according to the devotion of the Lord. And then I think we told that story of the burnt sweet rice at the Bhaktivedanta Manor, where Krishna rejected it. Prabhupada was in his room, Bhaktivedanta Manor, he heard some clatter, and he told his disciple, go down and find out what that noise is. He said, it was an offering, the Rajbhoga offering went onto the altar, and one plate that knocked over, one bowl, was discovered all over the place. What was it? It was sweet rice. Go and ask the cook, did they burn the sweet rice? Yes, it was the answer. Yeah, he did. It says so. Krishna rejected it. And he says, but it was made with love and devotion. And Prabhupada said, if it was made with love and devotion, it wouldn't be burnt. So, practical. If we actually cannot offer something to Krishna which has been burnt. If something is unofferable, hey, Krishna, Supreme Lord, he could eat poison, he's not going to be affected by it, but we don't stick some poison in there just to test him. Or if we put double the salt in it, we don't think, okay, Krishna, he can accept anything. If we wouldn't accept it, certainly why would Krishna accept it? So when we're offering, when we're cooking for the deity, we have to make sure it's done in the right consciousness, not in the mode of passion, not in the mode of ignorance. Mode of passion means that it leads to ignorance, so there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be disasters. So serving Krishna, particularly serving the deity of the Lord, you never know when he might give you some message just to let you know that he is actually there. But every day we can experience that also, because by praying to the deities, then the Lord reciprocates with our prayer. They're here to inspire us in this in their mission. They have a mission. They're not here just hanging out for us just to hang out with them. They have a mission. So our service, we have to see it in relation to their mission. And then they'll be satisfied and we'll be satisfied. We'll just stop there. Any questions? Stronger than the key. Prabhupada ki. Chaitanya Caritamrita ki. Singh Bhagavan ki. Okay, Nandi.
His Grace Prabhupada Pran Prabhu ki Jai.
We're back to